Hello guys, welcome to today's Chess for Rookies class. My name is Dariusz and I'm gonna be talking today about an opening that is very interesting, leads to very often very straightforward and attacking play where when playing with white you can obtain a very good position and very aggressive position, but basically can put lots of problems for your opponent. This opening has been popularized by Robert James Fischer, former world champion. And the name of this opening is King's Indian Attack. And basically you can use it with white from many move orders. So it's very universal and you can get very good attacking positions in it. And especially, if you are a rookie in chess, basically it can bring you lots of wins. I remember when at some point I started employing this as a kid, and I got to win lots of games with this opening. We'll not talk about my games, but more like games that I used to learn when I was studying this opening initially. So let's get started. This is King's Indian Attack opening, and let's see how it can, first of all, how it can appear on the board. E4. You start with E4. Also, you can start with move knight F3. For instance, knight F3, D5, G3, knight F6, bishop G2, E6, short castle, bishop E7, D3, short castle, knight BD2, C5, E4, knight C6. And this is the position we are aiming for with white. One of the positions we are aiming for with white. And let's see what other move order this position can come up from. Starting from beginning, E4, not E3 but E4, let's say E6, D3. Normally people play D4, but like we try to get to King's Indian Attack, which is D3, D5, knight D2, knight F6, knight G take knight G3, C5 let's say, G3, knight C6, bishop G2, bishop E7, short castle, short castle. Again, we got the same position, and from here basically we'll discuss in a moment what happens next. Let's see another move order which is possible to get the same position out of this from this opening. Let's say E4 again, first move E4, C5, knight F3, E6, and now not typical D4 but D3, which is a little surprising maybe, but this is the entire point of this opening, to get this King's Indian Attack. Let's say D5, knight BD2, knight C6, G3, knight F6, bishop G2, bishop E7, short castle, short castle. Again, we got the same position, and it is so therefore it can come up from many move orders, so it's very universal. And if you are playing with white, it can be really good an opening idea to have in mind. So I'm gonna show many games played by Robert James Fischer here, but also some modern games by modern grandmasters. So let's see what are the main ideas in this opening. Basically, in short, white tried to create a kingside attack. That's why it's sort of King's Indian Attack. White tries to immediately create an attack on black's king and directly get some activity and create some mating threats and basically try to mate on the king side. In short, so let's see what are the possible scenarios, what can happen if you are playing this opening with white, and how black can react to this. So let's go from very beginning. E4, C5, let's say knight F3, E6, D3, let's say let's say from this position. Here there are several setups that black can react with. First setup is of course what we already mentioned, knight C6 or D5, let's say, knight D2, knight C6, G3, knight F6, and then bishop E7 and short castle. This is one setup. Same setup is possible also with postponing short castle by playing B6 and maybe hoping for long castle. This is another possible setup. Next setup is by playing here bishop D6, bishop G2, knight G7, idea of the setup is basically, as we will see here in this position, very often white push the pawn e5, knight d7 and rook e1, and then try to create a king attack on the king side. We'll see this in a moment. Therefore, this idea of system bishop d6 here and bishop g2, knight g7 is to stop e5. Basically, right now e5 is impossible simply because this pawn will be simply lost. So that's the point, that you can't play really e5 because knight takes e5 happens, and black is doing great. So this is one other setup. Another setup possible for black. I'm not trying to cover all of them today because possibly there are even more than I try to cover in this lecture. However, I cover more than enough for you to be feeling comfortable playing it on your own. Another setup possible is basically to avoid playing bishop e7, developing this bishop to e7 or d6, but developing it to g7 by playing g6, bishop g7. So let's say knight c6, g3, for instance g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, short castle, knight g7. I will cover this setup as well. Another possible setup is to still develop bishop to e7, but try to postpone playing d5, and this is also very interesting, and because then we don't have e5, which is our main idea usually, but this on the other hand allows different ideas, and we'll see one game of Robert James Fischer how he beautifully won in 1957. And I think those are the main setups what black can do here. So let's just get started and see what happens after each of them. So let's start with the most typical one. Let's say d3, d5, knight bd2, knight c6, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, bishop e7, short castle, short castle. This is the most popular setup employed by many grandmasters, and I think lately has been very, very popular. But on the other hand, it's quite dangerous for black to play like this, simply because it allows white to immediately push pawn to e5 and gain some space, and then try to create a kingside attack. And this attack is very straightforward, so you can easily follow what grandmasters are doing here, and basically a little bit of imagination, a little bit of combinative play, and you can just very likely win. Therefore, let's see what happens. e5, knight d7, rook e1, and let's say here black has two moves possible. One move possible is queen c7, putting some pressure on the pawn on e5, because right now black attacks this pawn on e5 3 times with the 2 knights and the queen. And the white defends with the knight and the rook only. Therefore, the best move right now is to play queen e2, and basically to add another piece to defending this pawn. Also, queen c7 has its own drawbacks, and we'll get to that in a second. Another possible move here is to play b5 and to try to create a very quick queenside active play for black, which is the main, let's say, approach here. So let's see what happens after. Hold on, let me get to this position. Yes, this position. Let's see what happens after b5, because this is the most typical, the most classic approach, and let's see what kind of play white can have here. Knight f1. This knight comes to f1. Next moves are basically bishop f4, h4, knight h2, because pawn on h4, pawn from h2 will move already to h4, and then very likely play h5 and h6. Maybe bring the knight to g4. Sometimes also ideas of knight g5 or maybe bishop g5, and developing the queen as well. Basically, shifting all the attention to the queen side, to the king side, where white can basically create mating attack, hopefully. So this is the main idea here. And it looks very straightforward because it seems like there is nothing black can do to stop that. So that's why I think it's a really good opening if you just begin to play chess and to have in mind, because it's very simple, you can very quickly create mating attack and win games, which ultimately is the main sort of goal, to win games, right? So this seems like very natural way of developing an attack. Also, if you play this, you need to find very combinative play and develops your tactical skills as well. So many benefits of playing this opening. Therefore, let's see what happens. And first, I'm gonna show maybe one game of Garry Kasparov. What happened after move his opponent played here Rook B8, which is a little bit of a sideline because normally people play A5. But let's say how Garry Kasparov won here his game, because even Garry Kasparov employed his opening. H4. He started with H4, developing building up on the king side attack. Black continues B4. Knight H2, very logical. As I said, bring this knight to H2 and then G4. A5, H5. There we go. H6 is followed. H6 it could be a threat. Let's say, and right now, if black plays simply A4, white already can push H6, and this already puts some pressure on black, because, for instance, if G6, this square on F6 could be potentially very weak. So let me just show some scenario of what might happen if black don't react well here. Let's say knight G4, bishop A6, bishop F4. It's just sample variation, which is not necessarily what the best thing that black can do, but this is one of the scenarios because this attack can be very hard to face. Let's say queen B6, queen D2, maybe rook C8. Seems like natural developing moves. Bishop G5. Suddenly, if white trades this bishop, those bishops, pawn on square on F6 will be very weak. And if white queen can get to there with support of pawn on H6, this king will be very big danger. So, for instance, let's look what can happen. Let's say black plays something like, for instance, I'm not sure, but let's say black plays some move like bishop b5, which is not a great move, doesn't really lead anywhere, but you know, maybe black wants to do something like this. Let's say bishop takes e7, knight takes e7, queen g5. Let's say knight c6 back, because knight was under attack. It's not the best play, but it's possible. Knight f6, knight takes f6, queen takes f6. Suddenly, queen g7 is already mating one threat. So the only move to prevent that is king f8 after knight g5, for instance, hitting again queen f7 mate. So if queen c7 protecting here, suddenly white can play knight takes e6, and black cannot recapture back because there will be a check for the king on f8, and white already basically wins. And this is the very straightforward idea that the white has here in mind when playing this opening. Basically, try to get to h6, exploit the f6 square, and build up an attack and just win. Basically, go for a mating attack. Therefore, this is what may happen if you allow to push this white's pawn to h6. Black, on the other hand, can stop the, let's say, as was in the Kasparov's game, after h5 to play h6 themselves. But this opens up another possibilities, because as you can see right now, this bishop is very annoying on c1, because it puts some pressure on h6, and it opens sort of possibilities of sacrificing the pieces on h6 and opening black's king. So let's see how Kasparov made use of that. Knight g4. Already white attacks on h6 twice, and it's not so easy to react to this, because knight g6 could happen basically any moment. So his opponent, Kasparov's opponent, played a4, a3, not a bad move. Basically stops activity of on the queen side of black. Rook takes, knight b6, bishop f4. Knight takes h6 doesn't really run away yet, so there is no need for that. c4, and right now what is very interesting, Kasparov just ignored the rook on a3 and he played d4. Bishop takes a3, b takes a3, and the idea behind it is that without this bishop on e7, look, in this position, With this bishop on e7, this bishop sort of helps with defense in many lines. After bishop takes a3, b takes a3. If this bishop is not there anymore, we didn't really rook on a3 to attack on a queen side, a king side. So by this temporary, maybe not temporary, but like this sacrifice exchange sacrifice, we increase our pressure on the king side. So let's see how Kasparov won the game, because his opponent played queen e7, queen c1, building up on sacrifice on h6, c3, maybe idea is knight c4, queen a3, and if black will be able to do it in time, it would be obviously great. For instance, let's say if king h2, knight c4, king hg1, some random moves, queen a3, and already black is doing great here because taking his pawn for free and offering to trade queens, getting some time. Already black is doing great here. However, of course, chess is a very concrete game, and after such move like c3, having all those pieces concentrated on the king side, Kasparov just starts winning attack. So finally, bishop takes h6, very strong move. G takes h6, queen takes h6. White is a whole rook down, but this king on g8 is in big danger. Already knight f6 is a tremendous threat, and basically if white can play knight f6, it will be just mate. There is no way of stopping that. Therefore, his opponent played f6 himself, trying to stop knight f6, but there is no salvation here anymore, because it just takes on f6, queen h7, queen g5 check, king h8, and another knight comes into joins the attack with knight h4, and this knight comes to g6. Bishop d7 happened in the game, knight g6, king g8, knight h6, and this is game over. Kasparov's opponent resigned, so which is pretty much normal because this is already just mate here, basically in few moves, and at least queen takes h6 is forced, queen takes h6 just wins the queen. Therefore, white just by sacrificing initially an exchange, then sacrificing a bishop on h6, white created very strong attack that was basically irresistible. This is basically how you can win in this opening, because it's not really complicated if you think about it. It's just basically you are throwing in pieces to the king side and you just create threats, and suddenly black cannot defend. And yes, grandmasters may find some defense, yes, but like it's still very hard, and it's considered as one of the most dangerous openings that white can employ again for when playing, let's say, in must-win situations, or not any situations. Basically, you can employ this if you are looking for very aggressive and combinative play. And like Kasparov, you can win just like that if black makes just one small mistake. Looking at this game, it was pretty much unclear where even black made a mistake, because it seems like all the moves were pretty much natural, but the way the game went is just crushing. So let's see what black else can do and what white can do then. Let's come back to this main position, and let's not play rook b8, what was in Kasparov's game, but let's see one game of Fischer, a5, which is also a very natural move. h4, again, h4, b4, bishop f4, a4, a3, b takes. Yes, a3 is actually very important move, because this, as in Kasparov's game, this move is stopping black's activity on the queen side and gives some additional time for white to create some attack on the king side. Therefore, a3 is actually useful to play. B takes a3, b takes a3. Rook a3 is here not as great as earlier, because pawn is not yet on h6, so pawn exchange sacrifice may not be that great. But b takes a3 makes perfect sense. Knight a5. Another possible move is bishop a6, which leads to similar positions, however is more accurate. but you can basically try to employ same strategy as Fischer employed in his game, and black's task is not easy. Therefore, let's see what happened in Fischer's game. Knight a5, knight e3. Yes, sometimes knight can go through e3 to g4, sometimes through h2 to g4, but basically this knight belongs to g4 square, and either way, if it gets there, it's great. So let's see what Fischer did. Knight e3, bishop a6, bishop h3 is possible. Also knight g4 was possible. Not sure which move is actually better, but I like what Fischer was doing. Bishop h3, d4, knight f1. It's also possible right now to move back. However, I see more. I think, in my opinion, a little bit more accurate was knight g4. Just following the idea, but knight f1 doesn't spoil anything because right now after d4, this move sort of weakens e4 square, and this knight may come also here. So it's very subtle, but then g4, if you just want to follow typical plan, you can easily do it. But anyway, the game of Fischer here is also instructive. So he played knight f1, knight b6, logical, coming to d5, and right now knight g5. And honestly, now idea is a little bit different, because those pieces here seems like all the moves were pretty much natural for black, but those pieces are misplaced, and white create immediate attack with knight g5 and hoping to bring the queen to h5. For instance, after h6, queen h5 may follow, and after h takes g5, h takes g5. We are not afraid to sacrifice a piece, because right now we can maybe swing the rook to h5, maybe somehow remove the knight from f1, king from g1, and play rook h1, or maybe we can swing the rook through the fourth rank to e4 h4 and hopefully give mate to black's king because of this opened h file, which is, to be honest, very likely scenario here. It's good to know such ideas. Let's say if white can move the knight from d2, king to g2, then rook h1 in case of some check of the diagonal. Let's just make some random moves. Let's play, I don't know, knight d5 maybe. First of all, there is move like g6 possible, which already creates very, very strong threats. Possibly already black is winning. But just to show the typical ideas here, I just want to show that this maneuver of the rook swing is very likely good as well. King g2, maybe rook b2, black continues their play, and now rook h1, let's say, rook takes c2, and suddenly could be some moves like bishop e6 or bishop f5, anywhere this bishop moves, and because of this battery of the rook and the queen, suddenly there could be a mate on the h file. Let's say bishop f5 already, and there is no way to stop the mate, because queen h8 or queen h7 is next, and this queen and this king is basically just getting mated. One of the possible ideas here. Therefore, h6 was not played in the game. Fischer's opponent played knight d5 first, bishop d2, preserving the bishop, bishop takes g5, bishop takes g5, because this knight on g5 does lots of damage and causes lots of trouble here for black. That's why at some point black decided just to take it, which is logical. Bishop takes g5, queen d7, queen h5. Again, queen comes to h5, building some attack here. Rook fc8, knight d2. As I said earlier, this knight from f1 after d4 was played has a possibility of coming to d2 and to e4 and was creating more threats. Knight c3, bishop f6, very important move. It's also a very nice move to have in mind, because it's maybe not intuitive basically to play bishop f6 and sort of blunder it. It's not really a blunder, obviously, because it's temporary sacrifice, maybe not temporary but sacrifice, because after takes, this king again will be in big danger, because for example queen h6, queen g7 is already made into threat, or queen g5, queen g7 and kicking basically putting some real pressure, big pressure on the black's king. So it's a very dangerous attack. So you can think about such moves. Also, if the knight was already on e4, it could be possible to play also sacrifice the knight on f6. It's typical idea in those positions. Basically, you are not afraid to sacrifice a piece or even two pieces in order to really try to mate your opponent's king. So bishop f6, very strong move by Fischer. Queen e8, trying to defend. Knight e4. The idea is after queen e8, queen g5, queen f8, just trying to hold somehow. But Fischer just brings another piece, and the idea is if black would take this knight, rook takes obviously, and rook is swinging to g4 again through the fourth rank this time, but the rook also joins the attack. Fischer's opponent played g6, queen g5, queen h6, queen f8, and queen will have to anyway run away. Therefore, queen g5 played by Fischer makes perfect sense. Knight takes e4, rook takes e4, c4, h5. Right now, rook swings to h4, and white anyway opens the h file without even having to sacrifice a piece. C takes d3. Fischer just ignores even the pawn on d3 and just plays rook h4, just goes for mate. Rook a7, hoping to kind of defend, or like maybe from lack of ideas, just played rook a7 trying to hold somehow. Bishop g2, d takes c4, d takes c2, queen h6, threatening mate in 1, queen g7, queen f8, and right now final move in the game. I would like you guys to take a second to think about before I show it. Okay, if you guys haven't found it, it's okay, but the solution is very nice. That's why I wanted to let you guys think for a second. If you found it, great. If not, don't worry. Queen takes h7. It's the mating, basically mating 3 moves. We have mating 3 moves. Small tactical idea, after which Fischer's opponent, Miag Marsuren, resigned. And the idea is here that if king h7, pawn takes, and if king g8, there's rook h8 mate, and if king takes g6, bishop e4 mate. So sacrificing a queen also by building up the attack is also possible in this opening. Also in many positions where you build very strong attack, it's one of the ideas. Very nice game by Fischer, and shows what's the potential of an attack in this King's Indian attack opening. Alright, so let's get back a little bit and let's talk about this position, because sometimes okay, let's say black starts with a4. I'm gonna show right now a little bit modern game and of how those ideas can be employed in this opening. Bishop, okay, a3 is okay, and queen c7, bishop f4. And as I said earlier, if queen c7 is very logical, but it has its own drawbacks. And we will see right now in modern game played by Ahmed Adli from 2017, what is the drawback of queen c7 move and how white can make use of this, having black played queen c7 already. Bishop b7, knight e3, and as I said, this knight very often comes to g4 through either f1, through either h2 or e3. But with queen on c7, there is additional idea that white can use in order to build some attack here. So let's see what happens, because rook fc8 seems like very natural move played by Ahmed Ali's opponent. Rook fc8, developing the rook, maybe playing opening the c file at some point, making use of those two, maybe playing c4 at some point, making use of those pieces here, focus on the c file. If black gets to open the c file, the position will be great. Possibly, not really, because it all depends. It's still far a long way to opening the c file, but potentially it could be good. But in this position, having this with this queen on c7, which is actually badly placed, white has additional tactical idea, and this is what Ahmed Ali makes very good use of. Knight takes d5. temporarily sacrificing a knight, and after e takes d5, e6, opening the diagonal, opening this bishop, because this bishop right now hits the queen, and also by advancing this pawn, white hits this knight on d7. Suddenly, white's position it's very good. Position opens in the center, and black's pieces are all focused on the queen side and forgot sort of on the center. And let's see how Ahmed Ali beautifully won game in only 21 moves, which this shows a little bit different idea. What this knight takes d5 is sort of thing that you should remember that it exists sometimes if the queen is on c7 and bishop on f4. Bishop d6 takes on d7, queen takes d7, and just knight g5. Suddenly all those pieces are focused on the queen side, while king on g8 on a king side is completely defenseless, without any defense basically. Only those pawns which are doing good job so far, but its position is pretty much very dangerous. Because if the knight, for instance, this knight from c6 was actually on f6, black's position would be great. But if knight on c6, this king is in big danger. So let's see what happened in the game, because the game lasts only 2 more moves, which is astonishing. Also, knight g5 creates multiple threats. One threat is queen h5, another threat is bishop h3, possibly, because this diagonal is opened, and it could be a good thing for white to include bishop h3 in their attack. Rook d8, running away with the rook from this diagonal. Queen h5, very logical, threatening queen takes h7, queen f5. And right now, I'm not gonna ask you guys to find this move, but when I found this game, I was simply astonished by this move, because after this move, white simply wins, and Adli's opponent just resigned. And this move is rook e6, sort of voluntarily giving the rook, yes, but right now this queen sort of has very little squares, because this queen is forced to defense of this pawn on h7. It's kind of like it's stuck. I mean, if this queen could be kicked out somehow, this pawn, even if white then can take on h7, white simply wins, because there will be some mating attack. But let's say after bishop h3 here, if not rook e6 but bishop h3, black can still hold with a move like queen g6. Therefore, rook e6 move takes control over the g6 at first, and let's say after f takes e6, what may happen next is bishop h3. And right now this bishop comes to h3, pawn on e6 and queen on f5 are both under attack, because knight from g5 also supports hitting on e6. And if queen moves, let's say here, queen g6 trying to protect this pawn, bishop e6 follows, and if king f8, simply knight takes h7, and this queen is dropped, because everything comes with check. So, and that's basically it. Because after, let's say, I mean, almost anything, bishop e6 just follows, and there is no defense from that. And here, bishop e6, let's say king h8, it's possible to play, for instance, knight f7. After king g8, at least knight takes d8. At least knight takes d8. Basically, then after king h8, one of the possible moves is just to trade queens, take a knight b7, and just being left with the piece up. So that's game over basically. After rook e6, 2 exclamation marks, easily. Ahmed Ali just won the game right on the spot, and his opponent just resigned. Didn't see a reason to continue the game. He just resigned, which is very, very instructive and also very beautiful. So so this would be it for the almost it. Let's say for this line of bishop e7. I want to show quickly one more game of Fischer, how he won in this opening. I mean, in this line, let's say with bishop e7. Let's say after queen c7, e5. Again, knight d7, queen e2. This is what I said. This is what we said earlier, that right now we have to defend this pawn on e5. because he was attacked 3 times and we are defending only twice. That's why queen e2 is sort of must in order to put some more defensive resources to protect this pawn on e5. But as we said also earlier, this queen on c7 is misplaced in many lines. As this bishop comes to f4, there will be this tension on this diagonal, and if this pawn from e6 could be removed, there could be some issues, as the game of Ahmed Adli, with the one and rook e6 move. So let's see what happened in Fischer's game. b5, let's say h4, knight a5, knight f1, knight d4, which is another, let's say, typical move, because knight to d4, if knight d4 basically forces one pair of knights to be traded. On the other hand, it messes up black's pawn structure, because pawn on d4 could be a weakness in the future. But let's see what happens in Fischer's game. Bishop f4, rook a6, knight h2, rook c6. It seems like very smart idea to bring this rook to c6 and hit on this pawn on c2, right? But okay, rook c1, and right now black wanted to basically increase the pressure on c2 by playing bishop a6 with idea rook c8 and putting even more pressure on c2. And this is very logical move, but it fails tactically again to very similar idea as in the Ahmed Adli's game. Bishop takes d5 this time. We're not sacrificing and bishop on the knight on d5, but bishop. And let's see what happens. E takes d5, e6, queen d8, e takes d7. Suddenly queen takes d7, queen takes d7, white wins the piece. Rook e6, queen g4, f5, let's say was in the game, queen h5, queen takes d7, knight f3. And suddenly white is just simply much better here. And because this bishop on a6 is completely out of the, doesn't participate in the game. Pawn on d4 is under attack from this knight. It's very likely that we'll follow rook takes e6 and rook e1, and white will control the e-file. So strategically, white has all the strengths, and white is clearly in charge here. The game happened g6. Let's just quickly see how the game followed. h6, queen h6, bishop f6, rook takes e6, queen takes e6. Smart move bishop e5, because after bishop takes e5, rook e1, pinning and regaining the bishop back. f4, rook takes e5, queen d7, h5, continuing the attack. F takes g3, just h takes g6, ignoring the g takes f2 because just king takes f2. And position is still on equal material, but it's definitely white who has a very strong attack here. H takes g6, queen takes g6, queen g7, and very nice tactical idea, rook g5, basically forcing queen takes g6. And at this moment, Geller resigned. The game Geller finished. And because after queen takes g6, rook takes g6, there is a check, and also bishop on a6 is under attack. It's double attack, and white wins the piece, and that's just game over. And if black just plays rook f7, then there is move like queen h5, or rook queen h6 is also possible, but queen h5 is good enough as well. And there's simply a pin, and white wins the queen, and that's game over. So again, with the queen on c7, you have to look out for those ideas of sacrificing on d5 and playing e6, because they are very common, and they can happen basically very often. Let's see some different setup for black, what black can do. Let's say here b6 in this position, because this is the main position sort of. If black plays b6, try to be smart and prevent not to play short castle yet. Let's say bishop rook e1, bishop b7, c3 is one of the possible moves. Queen c7, queen e2. Sort of like it's possible to wait with move e5 until black plays short castle, because if we play e5 immediately, that's the entire black's point. Here, if you play e5, then knight d7 is already blocking the center, and black's king doesn't have to go to the short side. There is possibility that after knight f1, okay, if short castle would be great because we can continue our kingside attack. But the thing is, the king is still in the center, That's why queen c7 can be played. Let's say bishop f4 and long castle. And this, and in here, black's king on a queen side is much safer than on a king side. And that's the point of sort of delaying castle. So let's see what white can do in order to basically prepare and anticipate what on what black's plan. Bishop b7, c3, let's say, queen c7, queen e2. Still waiting with e5, which is very important and instructive. And right now it appears that after long castle, because black sort of needs to make this decision whether to go short castle or long castle, because all the pieces are playing, so natural next move is either short or long castle. And if long castle, suddenly white don't push e5 again, but just plays a3 with the next b4, and suddenly king on c8 is not so safe anymore. And if black plays b4, opens queen side and opens new sort of side for white to attack, and white is just simply better here. So you can just play next move b4, open the queen side, and create very strong attack on the black's king. That's why long castle is not so great in here. And if short castle, again, as I think you guessed, you play e5. Because if short castle, we always play e5 if only we can, and we create king side attack. And let's see one game of Imre Hera that he played against Surya Ganguly in 2017, which was, when I looked at this game, I was really impressed by it. Knight d7, h4, b5, knight f1, seems like all natural moves. b4, again, seems like all natural moves before explaining on the queen side. h5, white also following the plan of putting the pawn to h6. bc, bishop a6, again. If h6, there are all those ideas connected with knight h2, let's say, and knight g4. And as in Kasparov's game, basically sacrificing something on h6. That's always dangerous to play h6. But if bishop a6, white can play h6, g6, and bishop f4. And it's important to have in mind, because this queen is on c7, the idea is knight e3, knight takes d5 sometimes, if it tactically works. So you have to always consider that. But in this game, Ganguly played queen a5, hitting on d2, rook a c1, logical, c4. And in here, we always try to close the center, because with closed center, we have our chances of creating an attack are much larger rather than in open center, because with open center, black can create some counterplay. After c4, d4, white has big advantage in my opinion. Rook bishop a3, rook c2. It was also possible probably to sacrifice this exchange, but there is no need for that. Rook e8, knight g5, bishop f8, knight e3. Simply bring all the pieces to the king side and to the center. Rook a b8, and knight takes d5 happening in the game. E takes d5, e6. And right now this queen is not on c7, that's true, but we have such a strong attack here that we can just sacrifice a piece there, and for the sake of opening the center and playing e6 and getting to black's king. So such ideas also exist. Well, it's good to know them. f5, and right now very nice idea by Hera. At e takes d7, even sacrificing a queen. Rook takes e2, rook takes e2. And suddenly this rook comes to e8. And the pawn on d5 is very weak as well. This queen is sort of forced to defend this pawn here. And it's impossible simply to defend it anymore. Rook b7, trying to hit this pawn on d7. Bishop d6, nice. Because if bishop d6, there will be mate in after rook e8, bishop f8, rook d8, king takes f8, and rook e8 mate. Very nice mate. White is entire queen down and still wins. If rook takes d7, bishop takes f8, queen takes c3, and now just bishop d6 happen in the game, and bishop d5 is coming, rook e8 is coming, irresistible attack. And Surya Ganguly, very strong grandmaster from India, had to resign. And very instructive game, and shows attacking potential of white in this opening. Let's very quickly look at the different setups because other setups are less popular, however they still may happen. Let's say in here, if black plays bishop d6, bishop g2, knight g7, short castle, and here it was very classic, very long time ago played game by Fischer again, and let's see this game. And here he played knight h4. It's good idea. It's good in idea to know this because the idea of this move is to play f4. And after b6, f4, d takes e4 happen in the game. Another possible move is f6, which is probably better, but rook e1 for instance, and there goes some game goes on, I would say. It's probably the best what black can do. However, it's not clear whether black can fully equalize here. But for instance, one of the possible ideas is creating different type of attack, because playing f6 using the system opens gates to different attack. Let's quickly have a look at game of Amin Bassem, modern specialist of this opening. Queen c7, c3, bishop d7, knight f3, bishop e8 seems like natural moves, queen e2, bishop h5, bishop h3, hitting on e6, e5, and suddenly g4, bishop f7, f5. And then very quickly g5 is likely to follow, and white has very strong attack here. The white is just much better, and it's one of the possible follow-ups of what can happen here. And this happened actually in a game of Grandmaster Amin Bassem, and he won very nicely his game. We don't have to look at this game in total. We don't have to see an entire game, but until this moment it's good to know that such idea exists. Another possibility is after knight h4, b6, f4. Let's say d takes e4, because if white will get to play e5, then similar stuff may happen. Queen h5, queen h5, queen h5. Not what other lines indicates, and then the free knight g5, for instance. There are possible ways to attack like that. Also, it's possible to play maybe a little bit slower, just come back with the knight and play h4, h5 as well. With the closed center, possibilities of the kingside attack are much higher rather than with the open center. So what's happened in the game? Fischer Ivkov happened. D takes e4, bishop a6, hitting the rook. Rook e1, c4, c3, knight a5, e5, bishop c5, king h1, knight d5, knight e4, and this is already looking very promising for white. After bishop e7, just queen h5, knight e7. Already knight g5 is a big threat, similarly to what I discussed like a few moments ago. After knight e7, just g4, and threatening f5. White has tremendous pressure. So let's just see how this game ended, because it's very instructive again. What kind of attack white can employ here. Bishop takes e4, because this knight f6 could be very often an idea. So black has to deal with it somehow. Takes, g6, queen h6, knight d5, and just opening the queen side with f5. f6 could be a threat. Therefore rook e8, and if f6 then bishop f8, but white simply opens the queen side, f takes g6, f takes g6, and simply just going for it, knight takes g6, and this is just winning. It's not possible to take it on g6 because queen takes g6, and it's just winning. King evade rook f1, for instance, and made the next move on f7, or in a few next moves if black decides to play bishop f2 and knight f4, and if king h8, queen h7 mate. Therefore, the game happened queen d7, knight just comes back, and white not only has a strong attack, but also is a pawn up, has material advantage. Therefore, black's position is just collapsing. Rook ad8, knight h5, king h8, knight f6, knight finally comes to f6, takes with the pawn obviously. Rook g8, bishop f4, developing all the pieces. Rook g4, rook ad1. Finally, the last piece comes to the game. Rook dg8, f7. It's important to know that after queen d1, we don't take on d1 because we get mated ourselves, obviously, but we play queen h7 instead, and we are mating black first. So that's the small detail that I wanted to point out. So this is this bishop d6, knight g, bishop g2, knight g7 line. Let's finally discuss some setup with knight c6 and g6, which is or before we get there, let's quickly have a look at the game of Fischer, which happened. What happens if black goes for this system but tries to avoid playing d5? Let's say plays with d6 but avoid playing d5. Knight b d2, again anticipating d5, e5, but let's say rook b8 happens. And right now rook e1, what happened in the Fischer-Sherwin in 1957, d6, c3, b6, d4. And this is actually very important, because if black doesn't play this d5, white can play c3 and d4 then, and just control the center. And this is what happens exactly in Fischer-Sherwin. c3, b6, d4. It's important to remember that if black doesn't play d5, doesn't fight for the center, white can simply play c3 and d4 and occupy the center themselves. And this is what Fischer did. And very soon he developed a very strong attack and won a very nice game. Queen c7 happened, e5, very strong move. Knight d5, and here probably c4 was even maybe a little bit more accurate, but e takes d6 is perfectly fine as well. What happened, what Fischer played, bishop takes d6, knight d4, bringing the pieces to the king side, c4, trying to have this knight on d5 untouchable sort of, because it can be attacked with the c4 move anymore, so after c4. Therefore, but this has this drawback of knight takes d6, queen takes d6, and just knight g5. And again, just going for the kingside attack, very, very strong, very, very powerful play by Fischer. Knight c7, queen c2, hitting on h7, knight g6, and now again h4. Those ideas are very, very similar in many positions from this opening, even if the structure is a little bit different than in other positions. So it's good to know the general ideas also, not necessarily the exact move orders, but the ideas that you can follow and use in your games. Knight f6 happened, and now very strong move, knight takes h7. And the idea is that after knight takes h7, just h5, and making use of those pieces that are misplaced here, and if the knight comes here, bishop f4 simply, and the rook falls on b8. If king h7, sorry, let me quickly show. If king h7, do we bishop f4 immediately? Same thing, because right now this knight is pinned, and the bishop takes the next move, rook on b8. There is no way of stopping that. If knight h7, h5, knight h4, and now bishop f4, queen d8. But what's important right now, Fischer just ignores rook on b8 and just takes here, which is much more important. Rook b7, h6, continuing the attack, and this is already winning for white. Let's see how the game ended. Bishop queen h4 takes, rook e4, queen h5, rook e3, f5, rook h3, queen e8, bishop e5. King is in big trouble here. There is no way to resist the attack. Knight f6, queen d2, queen comes to h6, king f7, or to g5, queen g5, queen g6 also was possible. Here takes, rook h7, queen takes f6, rook h7, and bishop c6. In case of rook f6, just to quickly show, bishop b7 is at least possible, at least. And this is game over, rook h7, bishop c6, and this is where Sherwin resigned. Fischer won a very beautiful game, and again, beautiful example of what attacking possibilities white have in this opening. Finally, let's very briefly look at the system of g6, which is g6, which is less popular. I mean, it's actually a little bit less popular than bishop e7 systems. That's why I left it as the last. However, its ideas are pretty much the same. So let's see what happens. Bishop g2, bishop g7, short castle, knight g7, and then now c3. And because, again, if black does not play d5, then c3, d4 is what white should do. And if black goes d5, then very often white will play through e5. But so if d5, of course we can play e5 immediately, simply because knight takes e5 just wins the pawn, but we can prepare it by playing rook e1, and then after short castle play e5, for instance. And here we have the same set of ideas as we had earlier, but in even better version, because white already, black already played g6, and the pawn and have already very weak square on f6 and h6, and if this knight comes to let's say h4 first, and knight comes to g4 eventually, this knight can jump either here or here, and white have very strong attacking ideas. This is only the same thing but just better version for white, as earlier what we discussed. And if e5 is possible to kind of shift the direction, it's possibly what black should do, but it's kind of weird to play e6 and then e5. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. However, possibly it's one of what black should do, because after short castle, white simply occupies d4, the center of d4, and this is again the game of Fischer. After d6, he played d takes c5, d takes c5, queen e2, and right now e5 is coming, and we get same sort of position. Only thing with what d pawns, but it doesn't really matter much because the same ideas apply. Only thing is even better, was better for white, that white can develop this knight to e4. So let's look at a few moves what happened in the game. a5, rook e1, bishop a6, queen e4, knight d2, just queen h4, knight e4 is coming very likely. If this and now a4. And yes, we didn't go for mate right now, but I encourage everyone to see the beautiful game Fischer Dariusz from 1966, Havana. Not sure we have time to look at this game because it's a very long game, but I'll quickly maybe show a few more moves. Rook d7, bishop f1, takes, and right now this c4 square is very weak. This knight comes to c4, and white has very strong pressure in the on the queen side, and also in the center. This bishop is misplaced, and simply white has very good chances to win this game, and Fischer beautifully converted his strategic strengths in this position, and he won eventually the game. So I would suggest really looking at this game because it's very instructive. And just to quickly show also what can happen after if black plays if black after d4, c takes d4, c takes d4, after d4, let's say here black takes. Let's just quickly see what happens. e5, but let's watch this game on the example because the ideas are basically the same. So let's quickly have a look again at the game of Fischer from 1970 against Oscar Pano. This was a little bit different, but very similar. Only the difference is that rook is already on e1, not on f1. e5, bishop d7, knight c3, rook c8, bishop f4, and again it's very straightforward attacking game, and I hope you will enjoy it. So let's just look and enjoy. Rook c1, b5, b3, b4, knight e2, bishop d5, queen d2. With queen d2 we basically try to trade those bishops because it's the only defender of black's king, and then hopefully we can shift the knight to f6 or g5 and queen to h6, occupy those squares and try to mate somehow. So let's see how Fischer employ those ideas. Knight c6, g4, a5. Again, white attacks on the queen side, black attacks on the queen side, white attacks on the king side. And here, if you attack the king, it's usually, if you can attack the king and the attack can be strong, it's usually better than the attack on the queen side if you are not attacking the king. So let's see what happens. Queen b6, h4, knight b8, bishop h6, as I said, trading those bishops. Knight d7, queen g5, bringing more pieces. Rook c1, bishop h6, queen takes h6, rook c8, and again, we are not afraid even to trade here, because here we just continue the attack. And even though black traded so many pieces, the black is still under tremendous pressure here. Queen d8, knight g5, knight f8, bishop e4, very strong move. Basically the idea is that if pawn takes, knight takes e4, and this knight comes to f6, and basically made in few moves. So it's good to remember such ideas. We have bishop e4, and queen e7, and this queen e7 move has its own drawback because knight takes h7 follows, takes on h7, takes on g6, takes, bishop takes g6, and again destroying the black king's defense. Knight comes to h5, possibly to f6, and this is just game over. Very, very strong attack, irresistible. Knight g5, knight h5, knight f3, just king g2, knight h4, king g3, just few checks, that's it. Takes, queen knight f6, king f7, queen h7, and this is where Oscar Pano resigned, because after queen king f8 there is queen g8 mate. So I hope you guys enjoyed the lecture. This opening is very, very interesting, and it offers very strong attacking possibilities if you only are given the chance, and it's very likely that black will go wrong, because it's much easier to attack rather than defend. So if the defense is hard, and very often grandmasters fail to find the correct defense, white's attack can be very, very strong. Therefore, I encourage everyone to trying out this opening. Even if you play other openings already, you can definitely give it a try to this one, and hopefully you will like it, and hopefully you will win many games with it, just like Fischer did, just like many other grandmasters. And yeah, so that will be it for today from me, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you next time. Thank you.